I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zeiss Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Although that was not a good hand, so this is Arcane Mark.
Alright.
Welcome to Arcane Mark's Leshy Garden. And when we get started talking about this, let's start. So as you can see from the name tags below, I have with me here Linda Zeiss Palmer, the self-styled Queen of Leshies.
I do have that alias on the Paizo.com boards, Queen of Leshies. I've used it a few times.
She is the creator of the majority of Leshies after the original Bestiary 3 release by a significant amount. I think if you add in the Bestiary 3 ones, it gets close, but still the majority of Leshies.
Yeah, well, there's also the second edition stuff.
Yep. So, we're going to start by asking you a question, Linda. For some of our viewers out here who are like, Leshy Garden, that sounds interesting, but what is a Leshy? Because not everyone knows what they are. I know that may seem unusual to you, but can you tell us what is a Leshy?
Not everyone has been inducted into the Hall of Leshy Love. So Leshies are nature spirits that are incarnated into physical bodies made of plant material as a result of a druidic ritual. So basically, they're small little plant creatures that have a strong connection to nature, and really, there's all sorts of different types of Leshies. You've got your leaf Leshies, which are kind of oak tree based generally. You've got sunflower Leshies, you've got lotus Leshies. Pretty much any type of plant you can think of could have an associated Leshy type with it. So I brought my sunflower Leshy here, which I got as a gift from a friend. My Leshy fandom is known. So
do we want to give a shout out to the creator of Sunflower Leshy?
Yes, Paula created. Jason Keeley's wife created Sunflower Leshy for me, and Sunflower Leshy is so cute, and Sunflower Leshy lives on my desk at work.
But we brought Sunflower Leshy here, especially for this episode. Also, Desna's avatar is a very important comment that must be read aloud. All hail the Leshy Queen!
Sunflower Leshy also has this little friend. This is Pinecone Leshy. Pinecone Leshy is a baby leaf Leshy.
Alright, so now we know what Leshies are. But we also do have another question that was asked by What Do You Do Pods over on the Discord for No Direction, which is, what is it about the Leshy that has captured the imagination of so many, that has caused it to become sort of such a phenomena, and that sort of taps into something within people? Because certainly at Paizo, maybe some of the higher-ups who aren't as into Leshy, but a lot of the people, of like the newer developers and designers, are very into Leshies. What is it about Leshies, do you think?
Well, I mean, I can't specifically speak for everyone else, but I can certainly talk about some of the features that things people say when they tell me, oh, I love Leshies too, and also why I love them. Well, number one is they're friggin' adorable. Okay, like, just full stop, they're adorable, and it's fun to play a cute character. Other than that, the way that they are, the whole idea of having the nature spirit that incarnates into a body that's made of plants, there's so much diversity in the way that you can have them look. There's so much diversity in the way that you can have them act. You have just sort of this idea that you can look up real-world plants as inspiration for ideas for how they act. So you have this solid baseline to go to, both from the Leshy entry and from plants and nature. So it's a way to play a character that's cute. It's different from playing sort of the standard human character. So if you want to play a character and be like, hey, I'm special, I'm interesting, you can play this. And also just certain things about it, like with the spirit, the idea that the nature spirit, maybe it wasn't a Leshy in the past, maybe it'll be in more Leshies in the future. Leshies have an interesting way of looking at sort of the cycles of life. They're not really afraid of mortality in the same way that a lot of other creatures are. So that means that at least when I'm playing a Leshy, like, combats don't feel as tense because the Leshy isn't afraid if things go south. The Leshy knows that they will return to the natural ethos of everything. Also, the plants because like plants also have so many different ways that they could express themselves. It really lends itself very naturally to exploring characters that have a lot of diversity in the ways that they express themselves as well.
So it looks like Chiamore from the chat has sort of nailed the thing that you said before you said it, which is Leshies are fantastic, they're super cute, and a non-humanoid race. Which is kind of the answer we gave here.
Even the less cute ones are like an ugly cute, says Chiamore. Yeah, because you see like the fungus
Leshy.
And then you write about it, it's like, yeah, you know what? The fungus Leshy knows that they aren't cute, but the fungus Leshy knows that people will judge them based on their appearance. So like the fungus Leshy is going to be someone who doesn't judge based on appearances because the fungus Leshy has that kind of experience. And they all have like these little personality traits and quirks. So you've got like, you know, the gourd Leshy is a collector who likes to collect little shiny baubles. Or like the leaf Leshy is the weakest of the Leshies, but is like super brave and things like that.
It looks like David Nielsen said, little bonsai leaf Leshy samurai.
Yes!
Looks like there's some other comments up here about Leshy wardens. So I have a question for you about fungus Leshies.
Yeah.
You say that they're very cute, and they're not as cute, but they're understanding of people's appearances. But what about the evil Leshy drummer from Villain Codex?
Oh yes, well I guess Leshy it's in general terms, right? It's not necessarily monolithic. So another Leshy that I made was like a Leshy Skald in Villain Codex, which is part of an organization that wants to destroy civilization and bring things back to nature and very much advocates for survival of the fittest. So they're one of the villainous organizations. So yes, they're not all going to be friendly. They're not monolithic, but it's just some sort of tendencies to build off of.
That makes sense. But that is yet another Leshy. Alright, so it looks like there's a question from Desna's avatar in the chat.
Is there a correlation between the strength of the Leshy spirit and the size of the plant life the spirit is capable of animating in the druidic ritual? For example, could a very powerful spirit inhabit an animated redwood? So this is a really interesting question when you get to the connection between the Leshy spirit and the Leshy body. So what I've been saying here about characteristics that tend to be the case for particular Leshies, one of the things that first of all, we don't necessarily specify and tell you what kind of nature spirit is going to be inhabiting each Leshy, so that's kind of up to the player to decide what is the history of the nature spirit that is within you, which is another cool avenue there. But in terms of the sort of spirit versus body, when it comes to writing about this and sort of developing it forward for the second edition concept, I'm not going to get into the specifics here, but just sort of the broad idea that you have the spirit and you have the body. And in second edition, very much you have sort of you have the heritages. So,
welcome, Night Fox.
Hi. So you have the heritages that are generally based more on like the physical body and things like that. So then the idea for Leshies is that your heritage is based on your heritage is going to be like, okay, you know, I've got this oak body, I've got this fungus body, I've got this other kind of body. But then your ancestry options are going to be more based on the spirit that inhabits the Leshy. So in general, you may have certain types of spirits that tend toward certain types of Leshy bodies. So these like brave and spunky spirits may tend toward the leaf Leshy body. The collector spirits with more of a collector's bent may tend toward, and superstitious ones may tend toward the gourd Leshy body. But you can really mix and match however you want to, with the spirits going wherever they want. And then the idea is that, like, the same spirit doesn't always have to come back in the same type of Leshy body. You can have a spirit that's a nature spirit for a few hundred years, and then it's a leaf Leshy, and then it's a nature spirit for a little while longer, and then it's a vine Leshy, and they just sort of pass around according to what feels best for that spirit.
Also, I want to point out, specifically talking about could a very powerful spirit inhabit a redwood. Mm-hmm. In Worlds, there are many who call the Green Man, a mythic creature from Bestiary 6, the Leshy Kings. Mm-hmm. And they are considered to be the originators of the ritual to create Leshies, and they are one of the forms you can take with 10th level Primal Magic in the second edition playtest, a Kaiju or a Green Man. So there are definitely more powerful Leshy-esque creatures. It did not get the Leshy subtype in Pathfinder First Edition, but the Green Man sure does have almost all of the Leshy's distinguishing features. So There are definitely very powerful Leshies around.
And you could hypothetically have your Leshy worship the Green Man, like I have a Leshy that does in one of my games.
Alright. Looks like Desna's avatar said that opens up a ton of creative space for lore and adventures.
That's sort of the idea with Leshies, is to leave them as open as possible, to just be able to be like, okay, hey, you know, and then the idea that there really is a mind when it comes to the heritages of just using plants as inspiration for powers and abilities.
Alright, so I want to use a comment from Majuna to springboard us off to another of the topics that we prepared for, where I think possibly just as a joke, Majuna said Cactus Leshy straight from Final Fantasy. But actually, Wes Schneider, who created the original Leshies for Bestiary 3, did specifically post a picture online of the Cactuar / Cactrot as one of the inspirations. So I know you brought over some books to show some of the Leshies throughout the time.
Yeah, so
do you want to? Cactus Leshy may not be in the first one, but do you want to start us off?
Sure.
With
Yeah.
some
Well,
of the
Cactus,
Leshies?
I believe, Cactus is going to be in this one here. I don't think it doesn't have an art of it. I don't think, because I have another art for that one. But when I was making, yeah, it doesn't have that. But like when I was making the Cactus Leshy, I did give it an ability, Launch Needle, where it could launch a spine at things. I stopped short of giving it 1,000 needles or like something where it launches a ton of spines, because that felt like a little bit too on the nose. One thing I was surprised with the Cactus Leshy that actually made it through development. It was kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. There's no way they're gonna let me get away with this wordplay, but they did. Was the concept that you have
the Peshies?
Oh, god damn it! Don't steal my punchline. So okay, so in Catapesh you have this drug that's generally derived from cacti called Pesh. And so I decided, well, there could be a variant Cactus Leshy that sort of makes and cultivates Pesh, and they have Pesh in their bodies, and they tell you that they're the originators of Pesh. They've given it as gifts to people, and they're annoyed that people are trying to commercialize it. And then I said these Pesh Leshies were known as Peshies for short, and I'm shocked that made it through. Peshies are canon.
You know what? Sometimes fun and whimsical wordplay can actually make it through the
content. I like fun and whimsy. I think more than the average Pyzonian. So, because some people are looking at it more. I mean, everyone has their own different lenses of things that they prefer. But I like the cute and the whimsical as well. Chiamar says, leaning on Tui, what size are Leshies in Tui? Can they be medium, or is it small only? I think they're small by default, but that doesn't mean that options wouldn't potentially come out in the future to change their size.
There could be one. And you have the tiny ones that are from the weaker nature spirits.
The leaf order druid has the tiny Leshy friends that are weaker nature spirits. So that's something I wanted to be sure to address in the write-up, is the idea of how do these sort of PC Leshies interact with these sort of smaller and weaker Leshies, because it's like, well, this could be strange, but the idea that it's generally sort of like a mutually respectful relationship where so they recognize each other's strengths and things like that. There is also the Leshy Swarm spell in first edition, where you summon a swarm of tiny Leshies.
Is that an Ultimate Wilderness?
Yeah, that's
in your Leshy section.
Yeah, it was in the Leshy section of Ultimate Wilderness. The Leshy Swarm spell, where you basically just imbue tiny fragments of nature spirits into a bunch of plant matter, and then it pops up and makes a temporary swarm of Leshies.
Makes sense.
What was the question there? Is that a natural attack you can use feats to get monk shenanigans? I'm not sure what that's.
It might have been about the Peshy.
Oh, the Peshy, yeah. It could well have been about that. I think it's basically like, instead of having a good berry, they have like a dose of Pesh or whatever, because different Leshies have like their own like little specific shticks.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So did you want? I could talk more about like specific ones as well, or
well, I don't know. You brought over a bunch of books.
Oh yeah, no, I brought over a bunch of books so that I'd be able to talk about that. But
yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to show them off, or what you wanted to do.
So Vine Leshy has a lot more art, since that was actually a race, or now called Ancestry. Let me just grab that real quick. Leshies.
While you do, can you tell us a little bit about Vine Leshies and
I love these art pieces.
Sort of what made them some of the primary adventurous Leshies before we expanded out in in second edition to talk about some of the other types of leshies as well?
Yeah, so the first little hurdle to overcome when it came to making Leshy's PC race, or now ancestry, is the idea that Leshies were generally presented as guardians of nature who would typically stay in one place. They protect their area. They're not necessarily the ones to go out and go adventuring. So with Vine Leshies, I introduced this idea that there can be differences in the types of spirits that inhabit the bodies, and that the Vine Leshy typically has a more adventurous spirit that has sort of closer ties to souls rather than just being like more of the ancient primal spirits of nature. And so the idea with the Vine Leshy is that they're protectors of nature as well, but they're also storytellers and curators of stories, and they like to move around a lot and have new experiences.
So they're more interconnected with others in the same way that vines are sort of
yes, exactly. In the same way that vines generally grow onto others. Another fun thing with Leshies that I introduced in Vine, and I believe I carried forward, is that the idea that in a creature that can change as much with the seasons as a plant creature might, the idea that you wouldn't necessarily just have one static name throughout your life, that you could have a name that changes based on the seasons. You could have a name that represents your favorite, that represents sort of your favorite natural feature, or like an emotion that you're experiencing, or things like that. The idea that they can have more dynamic names. So I have Azure, a character whose name is Azure in spring, and whose name is Verdant Tailweaver, or Verdi in summer. And I can't remember what her other names are because we haven't gotten to that point in the campaign.
That's your Leshy Herbalist Alchemist.
That's my Leshy Herbalist Alchemist. Yeah,
from Iron Fang Invasion, right?
Yeah, who uses the Herbalist archetype, the Herbalist Leshy only archetype from Ultimate Wilderness.
There's definitely interesting, because in Iron Fang I'm playing a Samsaran Amnesiac Rebirth Psychic, and our characters talk a lot about like past incarnations and spirits and topics like that the others sort of that are more human, or catfolk or other human-esque, don't just seem to understand.
Yes, your different incarnations. Nohart asked, did I miss the Leshy ancestry versus companion discussion? We did talk about...
Yeah, we did talk about the difference between an ancestry Leshy or Bestiary Leshy versus the Leshy familiar companion, in that they're different kinds of nature spirits that might be some of the less powerful nature spirits that become the familiars. Yeah. And so they have
smaller bodies and they have weaker abilities compared to the PC Leshies, or like the standard Bestiary Leshies.
So Majina asked if there's any relation between Leshies and some of the treants or arboreal type tree creatures.
Yeah,
so
well,
we mentioned the Green Man. They have at least scholars who always seem to say things about monsters.
Scholars are oddly specific. Scholars are accurate a large percentage of the time when scholars say something.
Scholars seem to say that the Green Man is also known as the Leshy King, and were the creators of those Leshy rituals. It's definitely the case that treants and their like are very good at performing the Leshy rituals, because any plant creature has a leg up on the Leshy rituals. However, they are not necessarily as much part of the exact same taxonomy as the Leshies, in the same way that the Green Man is thought to be. However, they definitely are allies. As is Sunflower Leshy.
Sunflower Leshy, the text for Sunflower Leshy was actually Tanya Wolders' first, I think it was her first turnover period, her first writing for Paizo that was like part of a specific book. It was definitely her first monster.
Guide?
Yeah, no, I see. No, okay, fair enough. Her first bestiary monster, because she's certainly written tons of blogs and all sorts of guide texts.
Her first game thing.
Yeah.
Whether it was a story or a mechanic or what.
Yeah.
Because the rest was administrative.
Fair enough. So, Nohart asked if Leshies are from the first world. I mean, not really. They're from spirits of nature that are incarnated into physical bodies via druidic rituals. So, I mean, where exactly those spirits of nature originated from, it's certainly possible that some of them could have had their start in the first world.
I mean,
That's not something that
the first world is the
yeah.
first draft of um, the eventual world.
Yeah.
And furthermore, it is true that the first world is like a sieve for positive energy and some of the vital essence.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always, we haven't actually specified this, but I've always had a theory, ever since we at least had the essences, that even though they're called spirits because everything is freaking called spirits, that the spirits of the quote spirits of nature may be formed of vital essence rather than spiritual essence. One of the reasons is druids don't really deal with spiritual essence. That's more that's more in the outer sphere.
I like that.
So if the spirits of nature formed of vital essence, then they probably did come through the first world. This also could explain why, for instance, the courtly hunter specifically has the choice that the spirits that help make their animal really smart are like either one of those nature spirits that form leshies or a fae type of spirit coming from the first world. What if they were the same kind of thing because leshies came from the first world? That
would be cool.
That's one of my theories that wound up getting into more detail weirdly while like all the people on World Guide 2 were talking about a pretty disconnected organization that is not about leshies.
World Guide 2 includes Luis, and Luis is almost as much of a leshy fanatic as I am.
But I'm the one who brought up the leshy spirits in regards to we were talking about other spirits and whether or not it's possible that some quote spirits are not made of spiritual essence at all. We just overuse the word spirit, but are actually come from the life force and sort of the faith of vital essence. So
yeah, if
that's
this,
not
if this
official.
Comes up again, let me know. I'd like to try to advocate for making that canon.
But I think it makes sense, given that druids have a faith in the natural world and they do not use spiritual essence, that those kind of quote spirits are not spiritual.
Yeah. Great question.
Yeah, that's a good question. No Heart of the Shark led us to a good side tangent.
Disney's Avatar asked, are there any sort of leshy societies or organizations? So this is an interesting question coming from the perspective of the way leshies are sort of initially introduced in Pathfinder First Edition, where they were very much presented as like pretty much solitary protectors of a particular natural area. And there's also that sense that they can have different types of relationships with their druidic creators, but they generally tend not to, and this doesn't mean you can't for your own leshy, of course, but they generally tend not to like see their druidic, the one who creates their body, as their parent in the same way that like a lot of other ancestries might, because their spirit itself has sort of that ancient history. They tend to see them more as a friend or a mentor instead. So in terms of leshy societies and organizations, I don't think we've introduced any that are exclusively and only leshies, but leshies are certainly very much at home in a lot of organizations that have a strong focus on nature, such as groups that revere the green faith. And
also, I imagine the Druidic Enclave at Crystalhurst in Near Malthus, which is where your Leshy is from, probably has a pretty good number of Leshies.
Yeah, I would imagine that as well. It's basically like anywhere where you're going to see a concentration of druids, then you probably would see them coming up. And you would also, I imagine you would also see groups of them forming as adventuring parties and things like that. I mean, we're sort of coming from a position where there wasn't quite as much that had been established before, so I didn't want to say like, and then there's a giant city of leshies over here. But one of the kind of interesting things is that there's also a lot of the map that we haven't really gotten into. So I mean, if you look at the map of Golarion compared to the map of the Inner Sea, a vast majority of Garund hasn't been explored yet. So I think that would be pretty awesome if you could have a leshy city that's like somewhere down in the jungles of Garund.
This just in, the Lizard Folk Empire of Rune are major allies of a new Leshy civilization.
Well,
no,
if I can make that happen, that would be cool.
Who knows?
I'm too busy with Pathfinder Society stuff, with getting everything ready for Second Edition.
All right.
Rise of the Leshy Lords.
Rise of the Leshy Lords.
Oh, no one would ever let me write that.
I still think
maybe I could write a third party.
I still think if we ever do another 3-parter AP, that we could do Rise of the Jasons and have all 3 of the Jasons write the 3 parts.
That would be cool.
But it won't be about Leshies at that point.
No, I don't think they write about Leshies. No.
But there you go, the Leshy Lords, or Rise of the Leshy Queen.
Yes.
Where you have to stop Linda from writing so many Leshies that your own ancestry is written out of the setting.
Hey, I wouldn't write other ancestries out of the setting. There have to be other ancestries around for Leshies to be better than.
Okay, that's fair.
I mostly play other ancestries. I don't just play Leshies.
That's true. You played that Oread in Pathfinder Society, right? The Oread Leshy Warden.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, so I have one Oread Leshy Warden in Pathfinder Society. Of my 16 active Pathfinder Society characters, I don't just play Leshy-based characters.
You actually didn't make a Vine Leshy with the Vine Leshy boon I got you from Oregon.
I know. I'm gonna.
You didn't have time.
I know. I'm gonna make one eventually. I'm sure that I'll still have chances to play First Edition Pathfinder Society even after the transition when I actually have time again.
I know, right? We have so little time. I feel like the org play team and the design team are both in a very special position.
Very special position where we're like, we have this many things that we have to do, and we have half as many hours as that are required to do it. But you know what? This always happens every single convention season, and I'm speaking for the org play team. This always happens every single convention season. In the end, we make it work, and then after that, we're like, oh my god, how do we do that? I'm gonna rest now.
This is usually a time when the design team can rest because the Gen Con launch slate is out. But for us, with our new way of doing things that I mentioned in an earlier stream about organization, very happy we're doing that, but it meant we had to catch up on all of the other projects that we had just been ignoring our design pass on because we needed to get the Gen Con things out. Yeah. So it changed from one of our times to recover into a super busy time too.
Well, it's tough to get everything together, but I think in the end, like, people are going to be really happy with the sheer volume that we're releasing.
So Elf Tiro is wondering, will Leshy get 5 heritages in the character guide like Core Ancestries did?
I don't remember how many heritages I wrote, and I also don't know how many would have survived the copy fit process.
All right.
So we'll have to see. I think I wrote like 3 or 4 at least, not 5. I know it doesn't have. Yeah, I'd have to check on that, because the thing with counting the exact numbers, and this is something we talked about some in the stream about making a book, or Mark, I suppose I wasn't on there yet, but is the idea that making sure that the exact text fits correctly on the page and flows exactly to the bottom means that sometimes you're going to have things that are added after what comes in from the author, and sometimes, more often, you'll have things that get cut, because when we order text at Paizo, we generally ask for more than we think we'll need, because it's a lot easier to cut things out than it is to come up with new text, particularly when you're on a tight timeline to pull stuff together.
I think 1 or 2 of your things did get cut.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. I overwrote because that's how it goes.
Because we said, Linda, you can write Leshies, so she overwrote.
Yeah, I also wrote it like within like a day or 2 of getting the assignment.
This was like that Friday. You started at 9 p.m. and finished that night.
Yeah, and I wanted to write the Leshies.
Usually you can't even keep writing past 9 p.m. because you're too tired.
I know, I'm usually too tired, but I was just too excited about Leshies.
Alright. Well, they are pretty cool. What do you think people are going to be most excited about in the Leshy Ancestry?
Goodness. I think sort of that idea of the division between the spirit and the body, meaning that there's so much versatility in how you can build them. And I think that as it comes forward and you have more heritages, so I think probably that, just the flexibility, and also the fact that they're there, because I know there's a lot of other Leshy fans out there. I mean, I certainly didn't expect there were as many out there, but then when the topic of Leshies came up in the meeting, and basically in the meeting where the topic of Leshies possibly being an ancestry came up, I basically just like sat quietly in my chair because I didn't want to say anything. I wanted to let other people speak first. And then Eric Mona, who's leading the meeting, says, like, okay, Linda, you've been very patient. He's like, I know you're dying to say something. And then
he tried to pick one person to champion each of the possibilities.
But I wanted to let other people speak first because I didn't want to go on an hour.
No, Eric had you be the one who championed Leshy.
Yeah, and then I did champion Leshies, and they made it in. So.
Yep.
I didn't want to spend an hour in the meeting talking about Leshies for people who didn't want to listen to it. I'd much rather spend an hour talking about Leshies to people who specifically tune in for this.
Hobgoblins and lizard folk were on our list that we brought to that meeting and were obviously high up, but Leshies weren't even one of the possibilities that people took home to rank in order. They were just one that when I went to the meeting as the only designer who went to the meeting, I asked the other designers, what should we keep in mind? And they told me all the stuff we already knew. It was like, by the way, you should add Leshies to the list. And it sort of took off from there.
Disney's Avatar asked, if Leshies are only created via druidic ritual, how beholden are Leshies to the druids who bound their spirits or essences to the plant forms they inhabit? So they're not beholden at all to them. I mean, generally they look upon them fondly. They may see them as friends or mentors, but they are not. But they don't have like any sort of compulsion or bond. Creating a Leshy isn't like, creating an undead or something like that where you're infusing a spirit into something and then trying to have it serve you or whatever.
It's very specifically, it is a primal ritual, which of course druids are very good at, but that means a ranger could make a Leshy. We had a picture that never got published of the hunter making a Leshy, and plants can make Leshies, and in fact they have a bonus on doing that.
Just because it didn't get published in first edition doesn't mean that it couldn't hypothetically be published in second.
Well, we don't know if Adowin's going to be like something we use in second edition.
Oh, that's true. David says Leshies can be druids and hence create Leshies. Yes, they totally can.
Even Leshy non-druids can create Leshies.
Yeah, they have the power because they're Leshies to create Leshies.
Even a boggart with the nature skill, if they're good enough at nature, since it's a primal ritual. Mm-hmm. Anybody who is good enough at primal magic can create a Leshy. Your fighter, like Valoros, if he trained in nature enough, could create one. Leshyception, endless loop of Leshies.
That could be part of how your Leshy settlement comes about, is that you have a few Leshies who have a mission to embody as many nature spirits as they can, and so they drawing up this huge investment of valuable natural resources that they collect over the many years, and then they use that to mass spam this creation ritual.
Is this the plot of Rise of the Leshy Lords?
Hey, it needs a plot at some point, right?
So Chiamore asks if the primal ritual for creating a Leshy would ever show up, and would it be a replacement for resurrection? So, I mean, it could eventually show up some day down the line. Obviously there's not enough space yet. We wanted to give Leshies a full ancestry treatment and not take any of that space up for a ritual. But wouldn't be a full replacement for resurrection. And Linda, do you want to talk about the cycle of a Leshy if it dies, and if someone brings that same spirit back as another Leshy again, and why that would be kind of different from resurrection?
Yeah, because when you bring the same spirit back, they're not the memories don't fully carry over. So they may have some vague impressions of their past, of the many past lives that they've had and the experiences that they have, but they're not necessarily going to remember everything that happened. Now, in organized play in first edition, we had a ruling where it was basically like, yeah, you can resurrect them, and the explosion of plants that's left behind when they die counts as their body, just for sort of that continuity purposes. And if you're doing your home games, that's really something that you can work out with your GM. Like, do you want to say, okay, if I resurrect them quickly enough, they're going to go back into the same body because you want that kind of continuity? How much continuity do you want with this character in terms of what they remember and what they know? And also, do you want them to go back into the same kind of Leshy body that they had? Or maybe they choose a different body the next time around.
Also, if I recall, it was always possible that they would have all the same memories. It was just very unlikely.
It's very unlikely, but if you're a PC, you can always choose that you're doing the thing that's very unlikely. It's just like how when it comes to death and resurrection and the whole idea of Pharasma's judgment, if you're judged, then you're not going to really be able to be resurrected outside of some really weird 9th level spells in what had that 9th level spell that let you resurrect
What had
people?
the way to come back after
Planar Adventures, I think.
After you were judged?
Planar Adventures, there was something you were like at least partially judged, and you could come back, but then like a CR20 Psychopomp would come after you, and like it cost huge amounts of money, and all sorts of weird stuff happened.
I just know that was a major plot point in an AP, that there wasn't a spell like that, and I seem to remember that it was written in Planar Adventures anyway. So
yeah, well, at the very least, it doesn't always work, and it had a bunch of other weird stuff going on with it. But
fair enough.
But at any rate, where was I? I got into a tangent about Planar Adventures.
So you were talking about you were pretty close to done talking about bring back leshies. So we can go to the next question from Desna's avatar. Do leshies need to eat, drink, and sleep?
Leshies need to photosynthesize, and they need to absorb water. But they don't.
So are you saying Leshy trail rations is sunlight?
Yeah, this is actually an item in First Edition, and sort of like Leshy trail rations is condensed sunlight. So the Leshy doesn't have to worry about food as long as they can see the sun. But a Leshy who goes on a long underground adventure is going to want to pack some alchemically bottled sunlight or other tools like that to make sure.
What about non-photosynthesizing Leshies like fungus Leshy?
Well, by default, that's sort of, you would expect that if they're a photosynthesizing plant, they would need that. If you are a fungus Leshy, then you may need decomposing matter to feed off of. So Nora the Shark asked, do Leshies need fertilizer? Exactly. You might need some fertile soil to work with. You might need some decomposing matter. Basically, how Leshies eat is dependent upon how the plant analog that they are closest to would absorb and process energy.
Well, that makes sense.
That's another thing that I think is kind of a cool variability there. The idea that your Leshy is, everyone's like, I'm gonna eat here, and then your Leshy is like, oh yeah, no, I'm just gonna sit over here, I'm gonna turn into plant form on this branch and just rest for a while and bask in the sun.
Des's avatar says that's a good reason to kill bad guys to make fertilizer. And Night Fox asks, is the ritual to create Leshies similar to the awaken animal ritual?
I don't remember the exact specifics on the awaken animal ritual, but I think that it would be similar in the sense that you're imbuing something with another spirit or another intelligence or things like that. Is awaken animal just granting additional intelligence, or is it pulling a nature spirit into the body of the animal? I think it just grants
them additional intelligence. Well, it doesn't explain how.
Yeah.
So if it was like the courtly hunter and that it pulled on some of that extra essence, I don't know. Although it does seem to be adding mental essence to them, so it might be different. Because going up from non-sapient to sapient is sort of a process of the mental essence in some way.
So that might be different.
Although it might be taking a spirit. So Nohar the Shark wonders what happens if someone tries to drink from a cactus Leshy.
Well, in First Edition, cactus leshies can create fruit that acts as goodberry and puts a temporary endure elements on people. So I suppose yes, you could receive sustenance from your cactus leshy friend.
Was that an alternate ability for the vine leshy as well?
It's also an alternate ability for the vine leshy, where we're talking about First Edition here, because I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of the mechanics in Second Edition yet. I also haven't seen them post-development, so even if I said exactly what I wrote in there, maybe things got changed, maybe things got cut. But the idea that you sort of have, the vine leshy can kind of have berry hair that creates good berries, and they can pluck them and give them to their friends.
Seems cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, other than the Leshy ancestry you've already written for Pathfinder Second Edition, based on the paradigm that you created for those Leshies in that section, what are you most excited about looking forward into the future, which we can talk about since it hasn't been assigned, of the possibilities that opens up for Leshies that is not in any product?
I would say more heritages to represent these, more heritages that give mechanical effects and ways to really represent and embody different types of these different types of plants. So because before, if you said like, okay, I want to write up something about like a gourd Leshy, you have to write this whole entry. But now you can creating a new sort of body for a Leshy takes only as long as writing a new heritage. So if you wanted to say like, here's your Snapdragon Leshies, here's your Flytrap Leshies, here's your Lotus Leshies, here's your whatever you want to be a Leshy, I think it'll be a lot easier for home GMs to customize as well, because it's just this one little aspect that's changed, and then from there you can build on to things so much more.
So you'd say expanding to more heritages, so
Yeah,
you
I
have
would say
as
expanding.
many Leshies as possible.
Yes, well, prickly pear, like Festus prickly pear Leshy, and I guess that's one of the things that comes up with Leshies is just the idea that hey, what is this plant? I could have this plant Leshy, and so I really would like to see that.
Well, that sounds pretty fun. I think that a lot of the fans are gonna like to see that too.
Hmm.
So, out of the many different types of Leshies that you created, which are, as we said before, most of them, what do you have a favorite type of Leshy?
Oh, come on. I would say probably Vine because Vine is the first one that really sort of made that hop.
They were
Over
adventurous.
made that hop over to adventurous. Although I also am quite fond of Gord's superstition, which is why I put one of them in the one of the Pathfinder Society adventures I wrote, Reaping What We Sow. I was not nice to the Leshy in that adventure, not at all.
Or
But
Leshy. You were much nicer than Wes was to the Gord Leshies in his adventure that you then said you would carve out his face with a knife.
hey, Eltero wants to know what your favorite Leshy is.
Oh, well, but I was talking about the funny time that everyone just had fun.
It made context in the sense of the conversation. You
'Cause
don't
he
have
was
to make
just-
me sound like a serial killer.
He was just talking about how fun it was to have you smashing Gord Leshies in
He was like the
in
best
Hell's,
part of
in
Hell's
Hell's
Vengeance
Vengeance.
1 is
It's
killing all the
killing
Leshies
Gord
or whatever.
Leshies.
And then it was
And then
like,
what you were like, well, the thing about Gord Leshies is they don't realize that you can't just carve something into people's face.
that's
with a
also
knife.
Wes's sense of humor. He
Yeah,
liked
he
it.
loved that.
He loved
he
it. That's
favored,
his sense
he
of humor.
favorited
And then
it.
I got him a and then I got him a little. Oh God, I'm blanking on the name. Please help me here. It's in Final Fantasy. It holds the knife.
Oh, a
It does-
Tonberry.
Thank you. I just had a total brain fart there. I got him a little Tonberry plushie.
And then made little creepy pictures of it getting closer and closer to his desk.
Yeah, because that's what they do, And then they do karma, and they do 9,999 damage because you've been grinding too long in your Final Fantasy game.
All right, so I think my favorite Leshy is that's tough. It's probably either the Leaf Leshy for being the first Leshy and therefore blazing the trails for the other Leshies, or else maybe the Lotus Leshy for being a really interesting one in Bestiary 5, which was my first Bestiary, and also one of the possible topics for a later Arcane Mark. So it was a fun one to work on.
Douglas Avatar asked what the Leshy attributes of adjustments in PF2 are going to be. That's a little more technical than I'd want to get to in here before it releases, but I guess what I'll just say is that I did the Vine Leshy, and then I did the PF2 one, so you might expect that the attribute adjustments are going to be fairly similar in that regard.
Nohar the Shark wonders about a Sun Orchid Leshy.
Oh man, a Sun Orchid Leshy. That would be a seriously powerful Leshy. Especially a Sun Orchid Leshy alchemist that distills Sun Orchid elixir from its own
Yeah,
its own
well,
nectar.
the Sun Orchid Leshy is much like the Peshies gave Pesh. I'm the one who taught these supposed Thuvians who supposedly came up with this unique recipe. The unique recipe. It was me all along.
It was me all along, and they have been abusing my secrets to sell things to the highest bidder.
Leshy conspiracy. Now we know what the third race in the unseen in Starfinder is. Reptoid, Grey, and Leshy. No, it's not Leshy.
Let's see. So Eltero's favorite is the pumpkin one, Gord Leshy. Yeah, they're
so
super
Eltero says a Lotus Leshy would be awesome looking. Well, good news because we have a Lotus Leshy.
I'm gonna get the art.
And it is actually really awesome looking.
They are
pink.
super calm. They're super wise. They are the highest CR of the Leshies in first edition, which means they're CR cis because Leshies sort of thematically occupy that lower strata of CR.
Lotus Leshy survived. There was a Bestiary 5 cage match where different monsters were put up against each other in a match to see which one people would vote for to get more information. And Lotus Leshy survived really long. I think it eventually got knocked out by the winner, the Worm Wraith, and you can't beat a Spectral Dragon.
No, you
but
can't.
There's the Lotus Leshy.
There's Lotus and Flytrap.
And Flytrap. And they're both in Bestiary 5.
Flytrap Leshy Bard, yeah, I could totally see, it says Netflix, I could totally see a Flytrap Leshy Bard. One of the things I liked about the Flytrap Leshy is the idea that they have this amalgamation ability where they can combine up to form Leshy Voltron and become sort of this, hey, you get a bunch of them together, then you're fighting this much more powerful giant monster.
The Lotus Leshy reminds me about the best Pathfinder Society scenario that never got written. The Lotus Loom.
The Lotus Loom. Oh yeah, I was gonna try
Do
to
you want
write.
to talk about the Lotus Loom?
Well, the Lotus Loom never actually saw anything. Well, the Lotus Loom was my general thought is like, hey, I know we're gonna be doing some Haugen Tapestry stuff in season 10. Maybe late in season 9, I can do a scenario of the Lotus Loom where there's a Lotus Leshy that Haugen consulted with early in her travels and her process of making the Haugen Tapestry, and the Lotus Leshy has been alive for a very long time and still remembers some of that stuff, but the Lotus Leshy pretty much doesn't have time for disrespectful people. So part of the adventure is locating the Leshy, convincing the Leshy to respect you, helping the Leshy deal with some other issues so that you can
If I remember what you talked about it correctly, it was like there was this obscure reference to this name, and it didn't say that it was a Lotus Leshy. So you go looking for the sage.
Yeah.
And then you find this random Leshy, and if you're
so
just
most
like...
of the encounters are like on the way.
And if you're like, go away, Leshy, we need to find the sage, then the Lotus Leshy is not happy.
Well, I mean, this is part of why I never made it past the planning stage. But the idea being like, the PCs are being disrespectful, and the Lotus Leshy just goes all Lotus and turns into a Lotus and just floats on the surface of the pond and waits for them to go away. And maybe the next day they come back and they're more respectful, but... Lotus Leshy's not going to get mad. Lotus Leshy's not going to engage in arguments. Lotus Leshy's just going to wait for the PC to grow up and be more mature in their behavior.
The Lotus Loom.
Mm-hmm.
Chiamora says you could argue Flytrap Leshies are the most powerful because they can become one big Leshy. They certainly are strong if you have a lot of Lotus Leshy. Flytrap Leshies.
Yeah. That was an interesting challenge too, trying to make something that would be roughly the appropriate power when it scaled up without taking huge amounts of space and things like that.
Leshy Kaiju.
David says Leshy's notorious liars. Leshies aren't notorious liars. I mean, they're just kind of cute. Well, yeah, Leshy Kaiju with that. Well, I mean, the inspiration for that was looking at the Lantern Archon and its fusion ability, and I wanted to sort of build upon that with the idea, particularly with the fly traps, because I'm thinking about how, like, when you see these fields of fly traps, they've got so many of these little they've got so many of their little leaf mouths, and there's only so many mouths that you can put on one fly trap Leshy. They've got their head mouth, and then they've got their two little mini hand mouths. But the idea that you could sort of replicate a field like that, and then they've got a bit of fire resistance because fly traps, Venus flytraps themselves are slightly resistant to being damaged in fire. So that was another thing, is like definitely for all of these I was researching the plants themselves and using that for inspiration.
Cool. So let's see. We've talked about the start of Leshies. We've talked about where they're going. We've seen Sunflower Leshy. So I think that we have actually gone a pretty good job with the topic of Leshies. Does anyone else have any last questions
Are we
for us
actually
about
going to
Leshies?
manage to have an episode that's around an hour?
Was there ever a coniferous Leshy? Well, the leaf Leshy is typically thought of as being...
Maybe like oak or things like
Yeah.
that. I mean, like a pine Leshy would be cool. That would be something that I would want to see.
I mean, pine cones have definitely been used to create leaf Leshies. I think they're one of the ingredients.
They are, which is why I have...
Which is why you have the baby leaf Leshy.
Which is why this is a baby leaf Leshy.
And also, at the picture of Adwin, she's using pine cones while like a little leaf Leshy is shyly looking from behind her and watching the ritual.
Yeah, I have an entire...
Was there ever a coniferous Leshy from Canada?
Well...
Is the new question.
I mean, given that certain adventure paths established that Earth exists in the same universe as Golarion, that certainly means that it would be possible that within the Pathfinder campaign setting, there are Leshies in Canada.
Is there a maple Leshy?
Well, if it's Canada, there should be a maple Leshy.
Is Thirsty a maple whiskey Leshy?
You're asking the real questions now.
Alright.
The real questions now.
Altro says that they mean that they're from Canada.
Oh, will we ever have a Rafflesia Leshy? Asked Chiamore. That would be a really interesting one to have. It could have some kind of like stench ability, and then the rest of the party's like, oh god, don't stand too close. And it's like, what? And then the swarms of flies come over, and...
So Nohar the shark, looking out for sharks everywhere who are underwater, wonders if there are aquatic Leshies like seaweed, kelp, or algae.
Yeah, well, there is, well, you said kelp or algae. There is seaweed Leshies in Bestiary 3. And they have like these little sea pods or like seaweed pods that they can give to people to help them breathe water.
Alright,
Like,
I was talking
yes,
about
like
Bioplume.
Bioplume, exactly. Cute little plant creature that really smells bad, but it's still
There
cute.
you go.
So, yeah.
Well, Oddish was one of your favorites, right, Linda?
Oh yeah, no, totally. I also Oddish was definitely one of my favorite Pokemon. I think that's kind of like the seeds of my cute plant creature was Oddish's
Oddish.
in Pokemon
Oddish,
Red.
Oddish.
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 All right, we've devolved into Pokemon speak. Does anyone have any other questions?
It looks like we've gotten through all the questions here, so let's give the YouTube send off. So, bye YouTube.
Bye.